Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris.
I'm Magnus.
Yeah, as Chris was saying, we've been working with these tools and, trying to push these tools for specifically our crazy kind of character animation stuff with this film that we've been making called Turbulence. It's directed by myself and Magnus and created through Tumblehead Animation Studio in Denmark in collaboration with SideFX. And it's been really awesome working on this film, getting to kind of test all the latest Houdini tools and kind of push it through this production and battle test stuff and have really nice kind of bi-directional feedback with SideFX on everything. And we've done a few talks about this film already as we've been working on it. One at FMX that Magnus did. We did one together at Annecy, and then Jesper, who is our lead animator on the project, did a talk in Paris about working with Houdini, coming from Maya as a character animator. And so that's all really great, and you can check that stuff out online. But today we're going to show, for the first time, a full cut of the film. It still is work in progress, as you will see. Hopefully you can sort of gloss over some of those parts for the time being. But that said, we are going to be finishing the film very soon, and we'll be releasing the entire film and all the assets to the community. And we're going to talk today about some of the stuff we've been working on in the film, and some of the things we've been building for it that you'll see more of later on as well. But first, let's start by showing this cut of Turbulence.
This is your captain speaking. Just wanted to flag that we may be experiencing some turbulence shortly. We'll do our best to keep it down to a minimum, but we would appreciate everyone keeping their seatbelts fastened at this time, and we thank you in advance for your cooperation.
Oh, sorry. Is this normal?
Oh yeah, this is totally normal.
Are you sure? How do you know that?
Yeah, so basically my uncle, who's like this super experienced pilot, told me that the chances of a turbulence-related accident, it's actually crazy rare. It's all about like aerodynamics and thermodynamics and even with turbulence like this, like it's probably really unlikely that the plane would crash.
Yeah, you're right. I'm fine. Flight attendants do this all the time. I'm pretty sure they'd be freaking out if there was a problem.
Water? Would you like some water, sir?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Is this your first time on an airplane?
No, I've been on airplanes plenty of times. I love airplanes. I think it's a real feat of engineering that we made this, giant hunk of metal stain the sky. And they usually got 2 bathrooms.
Yeah, it's amazing. My uncle's actually a pilot, and he told me it's because of the aerodynamics that they're able to stay in the air.
Yeah, I'm flying all the time for work. Turbulence is just like waves on the ocean, except in the sky.
Right, exactly, because of the aerodynamics.
Oh my god!
We're actually going really fast right now, so brace yourselves, and on the bright side, we may land a little bit early.
Ha!
Shh.
Yeah, real nice one, pal.
Oh god, oh my god. Oh, this is it. Oh no.
Hey, if I'm gonna die, so be it, nothing I can do about it, so I might as well just enjoy myself.
Oh my god, we're going down. This is it. This is the end for me. Oh my god.
See, that wasn't so bad. It's all about the aerodynamics, just like my uncle said. It's so important to learn about this stuff.
Yeah, no, that's not too bad at all, for sure. Thanks.
Oh, are you okay, hon?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, for a minute there, I almost thought we were gonna die.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So the first thing that I'm going to dive into is one of the things that we've been working on for this is generating the crowd of background characters. I've built in the past some very silly kind of like procedural character generators in Houdini. And I found it to be really fun to just like generate a ton of these characters using different parameters, using wedging in tops, and then, you know, populating like environments and worlds and stuff with these characters. So I thought it would be cool to do something similar for Turbulence, but I didn't want to use, I don't know, a bunch of weird naked little monsters sitting on the plane. So I decided to take the character models that Jesper had sculpted that we brought into Houdini and that we were using for all of our rigs. And I just sort of merged them all together, split them off into each of their own different chains so that I could then sort of like organize them and move the heads down to the origin. And I use this really handy compile block that I invoked on every different chain so that I could kind of organize each of the elements separately. And basically in this little subnet, I'm sort of saying, okay, let me take the eyes from each character based on the name attribute, and then move those down to the origin. Same with the ears and the nose, move those all down to the origin and save those positions of where they're being moved from on the heads of the characters. So just like pick each part, store each position on each head for each part, and then move each part to the origin. And then so you end up with this whole clump of different like parts and stuff that I then am able to split out per part instead of per character. And then I'm basically just able to copy the different parts to the corresponding positions on each head where they sort of originally belonged. And I made this sort of controller to drive the blast nodes that are sort of selecting which part I'm using in each stream for each part. And I'm driving those with tops. And then I end up with kind of all these like sort of randomized different characters just using the existing parts so that it all kind of fits in with the style of the rest of the characters and isn't like super jarring. Then from there, I can just copy them onto the different bodies as well. They all have skeletons that we've already built, so I'm using KineFX to sort of pose them all sitting in the different seats. And then I can do a little fun stuff with Vellum to make them actually like flop down and sit in the seats. And this will also come in handy later for once I, during the turbulence sequences, and kind of having them sort of like jiggle all over the plane and get shaken by everything. But just for some kind of idle animation, I just kind of bake them all out with some Vellum just sitting in the chairs. And so that's what we're using for the time being. Yeah, that's been a fun little solution for that. And I'll pass it over to Magnus to talk about some other stuff real quick.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, welcome to this little segment, Skinning in Houdini for the Maya artist. And for the Houdini artist, skinning in Maya means bone capture, basically, or capturing weights. So yeah, since the FMX talk where I talked about rigging, I got a ton of questions from a lot of Maya riggers, how you would do certain skinning setups in Houdini. So here we go. So to start off, I have a zombie version of Jimmy here, and I have the skeleton. So that's just geometry, and for the project, I made a little skell prepper node that just takes care of orientation, naming, and all of that stuff we share with the project. So in Houdini, I like to use this method where you attach packed geometry on the joints, and there's this little node called attach joint geometry you can use. So basically, it just uses that geometry as kind of to help you getting a better capture with the joint capture by harmonic node. Very fancy name. So that's what that's doing. So I just tried to wrap that up in a neat little tool, HDA. And so the first thing I want to talk about is how to blur your skin weights, which is something I do all the time in Maya. And in Houdini, that's really, really easy. So I have my raw weights here. And yeah, I made this little setup to visualize the skinning I'm just using the KineFX nodes, the joint deform, and the rig pose to just preview the skinning while I'm painting the weights. So that's what you're seeing here. And when you see here on the skinned version, the transition between the capture weights is a bit harsh on the backside there. So what you can do is to just simply use a smooth sub, set it to bone capture, filter quality to 1, that's important. And then what I like to do is do that in a separate stream and just copy it over back to the main stream with the geometry I want to add it to. So it's super easy like that to automatically smooth your weights, basically. And of course, this Houdini is all procedural. You can go back, change it later. You can go as fancy as you like, but yeah. So that's what I usually do when skinning cartoony characters as the base. Next thing I want to mention is how to transfer your skinning. That's something you do all the time. So maybe the topology of the character model got changed from the modeling department, and you want to transfer over the old skinning from the old model to the new, or in this case, I just want the hair to follow the head. And yeah, there is nothing special to it in Houdini. It's just bone capture is an attribute like anything else in Houdini. So you can use this attribute transfer, and you just set it to bone capture. Little trick I showed before is to subdivide the source geometry. That's an important step. But yeah, it's just that you get the transfer, and again, this is all live. So you do this setup once, and if the geometry change again, it will automatically propagate. So that's awesome. And then the obvious headbang, of course, at the end here. Yeah. And also, I got asked a lot, how do you do rigid bind in Houdini? And there are a few ways to do it, but what I like to do is just to use the joint capture proximity node that I'm highlighting there. Because it's really fast, and just set the max influence to 1, and basically then you get a rigid bind. Remember to turn on the blend so it doesn't overwrite the previous weights. So if I wanted now to just attach the eyes and the nose to only one joint, it's just one node like that. So now Zombie Jimmy is looking pretty smug. And the last thing I wanted to show, which I also gotten a ton of questions for, is how to do skinning layers in Houdini. So if you're coming from Maya, I'm sure you use NG skin tools. It's immensely helpful to be able to paint weights on layers. So I'll show the technique we used here in Turbulence. So again, here I'm just bringing in a few more joints. So I'll set up some animation on the jaw joint, and I want to blend the skinning of the jaw in on a new layer. That's something I'm doing all the time. So since we are dealing with a layer, we are no longer, painting the capture. You're simply just painting a mask attribute. So it's even simpler. So here you're just using the attribute paint, setting the brush to surface fall off, so I'm only painting the lower side of the jaw. And if I feed that into, again, like a proximity, I'm just using a rigid bind for the jaw, max influence 1. And the trick to having the same layer function is to use the attribute composite node. It's basically layering attributes, which is what skinning layers are. So again, the Houdini weight is like a general node that is, again, here used to solve this very specific example. So here it looks horrible, but it is on a new layer. But yeah, there are obviously some tricks we can do with the skinning to make this process a lot easier. One thing is to mirror the mask, which I will do afterwards. Here, I'm just using an edit sub to kind of open the mouth a little bit so it's easier to paint. And this is non-destructive, by the way. So I can do this on a stream where I'm painting and just transferring over the attributes to another stream. So now I can get to the mouth corner, which was really tricky before. So now I can much more easily paint the mask. Hopefully that makes sense. And then, yeah, it's still not looking really good over there on the other side. So that is the result that I'm seeing live, right, while I'm painting. So I could try to make the mask a little bit better and fiddle around, but yeah, I would not be happy with that result. So one thing you can do to help is obviously just mirror the mask to get symmetry. Again, just a general node in Houdini for all attributes. And you can blur the mask, this time using the attribute blur is good for that. So now it's already a lot better, and I can paint on the raw weights, but having the blur and the mirror run live in the result, which is immensely helpful. I'm working on characters like this. And yeah, so this is already looking a lot better. And there's one last trick I wanted to show that I've been using for all the characters in Turbulence, which makes the skinning like 100% procedural, which I obviously like. And that is to use the distance from geometry node, which takes like I usually use like a box or a low poly object that I make to fit within the capture I want to give. And now the influence here is 100% derived from the position of that low poly object. So you can see now I can get super specific how I want the mouth corner to deform, which is very important when doing facial animation, facial rigging. You want to have really good control of where the mouth corner is for doing certain expressions, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's just making that mask attribute and then getting it over with the attribute composite node. Yeah. So in matter of minutes, you can have a pretty decent skinning setup, fully procedural. And yeah, I could never go back to doing this manually. So yeah, over to Chris.
Nice. Awesome. So yeah, I just wanted to talk also about this really quick little tip that has been super helpful and that I've been loving using since we got the LPEs in Karma XPU, and we've got Copernicus now, which makes it really easy to kind of tweak lights in post. So I'm just going to show quickly how I do that. In this scene, I have 4 lights. There's the physical sky, which is the sky and the sunlight, and then there's these 2 lightning lights coming from the clouds. So I'm just basically saying in this LPE tag node to create LPEs using the light name. But there's a bunch of other ways you can kind of automatically create those using the LPE tag node. And then if you go into the Karma render settings, you can just go to the AOVs tab and turn on this split per LPE tag on the beauty pass or more passes if you want to get more complex with it. And then when you're in the viewport and you're rendering and stuff, you can just go into this little menu in the side here and just select and see, even while it's rendering, all the different sort of lighting contributions and the different light passes. So I'm happy with all these, and I want to move into compositing. I've got the sunlight, I've got the sky, I've got the lightning on the bottom and the lightning on the top. And then so setting these up in Copernicus is really easy. I just bring a file node in, bring the EXR sequence in, and I just hit this add AOVs from file button. And then when you do that, it sort of exposes all these different beauty passes for each of the different lights. And I can just basically rebuild my whole beauty pass from each of those really easily by taking each one. So you'll see again here, I have nulls where I have, each of these different ones split up. And then the math in terms of getting it to, recreate that beauty pass is incredibly simple. You're literally just adding the different passes together. So there's the bottom and the top lightning, and there's it with the sky, and then there's it with the sun, and it looks exactly identical to the original. So then that means that you can then adjust lights in post. I use this node called the bright node that's in COPS. that lets me tweak the brightness of the lights as much as I want, and you can really kind of finesse it a lot more in post. So it's nice to just get the lighting like, 80 or 90% of the way there in your renders, and then do all the final tweaks and stuff, change the colors of the lights, change the exposure, or also animating the lights. One caveat is that playing back EXRs in Copernicus is still a little bit slow, and I'm hoping that gets improved as it's coming out of beta and stuff. But it's still in beta, so we're still working with this very early version of COPS. But it's working super well, and it definitely gives you a lot more control if you want to animate lights and stuff. Because then if you don't like the timing of the animation or something, you don't have to re-render the whole scene. You can just easily tweak it one more time in COPS and spit that out again. So really, really helpful, and I've been using this more and more since 20.5 came out. And I'll pass it back over to Magnus to talk about our awesome pipeline setup.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Tumblepipe. Yeah, catchy name, isn't it? But yeah, I'm super excited to show you this. It's been an ongoing effort at the office. At Tumblehead, we wanted to develop like a Houdini-only pipeline to make films, TV series, whatever you want. It's developed by Søren Nørbeck, which is our pipeline TD at Tumblehead. So basically what it is, it's from within Houdini, a pipeline that uses USD to publish the different department data. So except for obviously the Apex stuff with the rigging that needs to be in subs. We want to have it lightweight, artist-friendly. It's based on Python and HDAs, and it will be released with Turbulence. So if anyone needs a pipeline and want to do all the stuff in Houdini, go ahead. So hopefully this will be useful to a lot of freelancers and studios, and we'll obviously keep updating it for a long time. So I want to show the asset workflow. So here we have the UI, prototype UI as it looks now. You have your assets, you have your departments, you have some buttons to save, refresh, publish, all of that stuff. So here in the modeling department, I use just a subcreate to import the model, add some UVs, set some settings, and then the pipe automatically adds all of these import and export nodes with the settings. So you can hit publish in the UI or just export on the node. And then it's just one click to go over to the look dev department. It opens that shot. It automatically resolves the versioning and pulls in the right asset for you. So this is one click, super fast. So here I'm adding the look dev stuff, materials, etc. Have a little like a look dev studio HDA for doing for sending stuff out for review. And again, just exporting with the same HDA, just set the look dev instead of model. So super easy. In the rigging is the only thing that's a little bit different. So we import with USD, so we're sure that the model is the same as all the other departments are using. But we have to bring it into subs because Apex, which is the new Apex/KineFX, the new rigging framework, lives in subs. So here we have the rig setup. The dad character is looking very jolly. And yeah. And then the last node is just another export node that feeds the rig into the pipe. And I'll show you in the next step here how we bring that into a shot. So the last part is just, I want to show how you set up a shot with a pipe. So you go here, you go to your shot, choose your department. In this case, I'm going into the layout scene. So here you have one of those pipeline assets called import assets, fancy name. You choose your department, you choose whatever asset you want to bring in. This could also have been from a JSON file, I'm just using the UI here. And it takes care of instancing if you have characters that are using the same rig, but there's different characters in the scene, like the babies. So it takes care of all of that instancing in Solaris, but also in Apex, which is kind of neat. And so here you see how it kind of builds the shot for you. So every start of every department, there is like a shot builder type that takes in and resolves the asset version and rebuilds the whole scene for you. And we have something called kits. For example, is the shot camera that we use, stuff that we use for all the shots or even for all the seasons of a show or whatever. So right now we're just using it for cameras and lighting packages and stuff like that. Yeah, so in layout, you can just use the edit loop and move the characters around to just roughly get stuff in place. And the pipe is taking care of the kinds, primitive kinds in lobs, which is nice. So when you're selecting stuff, you can use the selection filter. So if you set that to default, which is component, it will automatically just select the characters for you. You don't have to think about what other stuff you have to select. So here I'm in animation. And again, just showing here how the build shot HDA works. It's just built of the same HDAs you already seen before. So it's nesting those and using Python to set it up, get the right versions again, and set up the whole shot, basically. And here it takes care of the duplication stuff. So we have the item is the baby, but then you have like an instance name as well. And in animation, currently we are animating the camera in Solaris. You cannot move the camera around in the scene animate yet, but I think that is coming soon, maybe in Houdini 21, maybe? So here inside our animation lab, that's a bit specialized version of the software 8 that takes care of setting up the rigs and bringing it back to Solaris. So yeah, that's also taken care of for you. So now we have the animated characters back in USD land, Solaris land, and it's looking exactly the same as in subs. Yeah, Jimmy is not too happy. And lastly here, I just want to show how you import the rigs. Currently, you have to click these buttons manually, but obviously we make it so whatever you import in layout will automatically be picked up in Apex land. So this is exactly the same as in Solaris, but it's building the whole scene for you just now in Apex instead of Solaris. So you have this kind of two versions of the same shot in different contexts. Right, so the last part is the lighting. So here I just jumped over to the lighting department. Again, using the build shot. You pull in all of the departments except the department you're in. That's how you work in USD usually. So you just mute your own department. So you don't, else I would have getting double lighting because I have exported the lighting before. That makes sense. So here, the shot builder is using the asset import layers. So you have the model, the look dev. Here is the layout, which was just the transform you saw earlier. And here is the animation. So you can debug the whole scene on individual assets and check different versions for all the different caches, which we found immensely useful. And then in the last node, it's bringing everything together, and you have your shot again. And everything is hopefully looking very neat in the outliner. And here we are using the import kit layer again, just bring in like our lighter made like a package for lighting, which is basically just a USD file with templates using light instancing, which is new in 20.5, really cool feature. So you have this base lighting already in there, and then you can go to town with adding whatever you want, new lights, or just using the light mixer to do overrides. We've been using this blend node a lot, so you have two different streams, so you can have different light mixers maybe. You can use the blend node to just blend between the different overrides, like a camera or the light linker or whatever. So yeah, basically it's just taking all these USD department layers, like layout, animation, lighting, putting it into like a shot container or manifest or whatever you want to call it, and then it's being rebuilt per department again. Currently, we're using Deadline to do all the render submission and automation, but yeah, it would be fun to look into HQ at some point, since it is an old Houdini pipe after all. And definitely more compositing and look dev stuff will be coming soon. Back to Chris.
Nice. Yeah, really nice stuff with the blend node there in Lops. So yeah, last thing I'll try to talk about really quickly is there was this shot with this character who's like on the plane and he's not afraid to die. It's very silly, but I wanted to do this character and we hadn't started anything with him yet. And I knew, you know, getting ready for this presentation that Magnus and Jesper were really tied up with stuff, but I'd learned a bit of how to build my own Apex rigs using the auto rig components, which is kind of the easier way to do things if you're not like, you know, a super skilled Maya rigger, Python, you know, person. So I'm going to show really quickly sort of how I did that. First thing is obviously make a skeleton. One quick tip about that is that if you are doing that with your geo plugged in and you have these separate pieces of geo, it can end up placing the joints in weird places. So my personal fix for that is to just do a VDB from polygons and then convert that back. And then you get much nicer joint placement where it's kind of putting it in the middle of the volume, which makes that a lot easier. Everybody's happier. And then name all the joints, name everything on the left side L underscore or some kind of convention like that, so that you can then easily do a skeleton mirror and just set the group to be the joints named L underscore star. And then you can find any L underscores and replace them with R underscores for the right side. Plug that into a joint capture by harmonic, the geo, and then the skeleton. And I wanted to capture the body separately from the head and the eyes separately from the head so that the head joints weren't influencing the eyes and the body joints weren't influencing you know, the deformation of the head. So I was able to do that really easily using the joint capture by harmonic by just setting the groups for the joints and the skin, and then the same for the head there, but in a second one that I just put in line after the first joint capture by harmonic, and then I set the blend factor to 1 over here. And then it's important to check your weights and your rig and everything in KineFX, which I love to do with my like procedural animation nodes and stuff. And you can see, yeah, the skinning works well and everything. And you know, a lot of the times people I think are trying to figure out Apex and they're not necessarily debugging stuff in KineFX first to see in a regular bone deform if it works, and if it doesn't work there, it's not going to work in Apex. Yeah, so with, you know, the separate skinning for the eyes, the rigid binds and stuff, I can kind of like move them around wherever I want on the head. Then I got to add the blend shapes. So I have different blend shapes sculpted for the head. I just used the handy merge packed node where I can also name each of those different blend shapes. Or if you have the nodes named properly plugging into it, it'll just automatically use those names. I plug that into the character blend shapes add node, which attaches them to the geo of my rig. And I just make sure to set the skin name to head, so that it knows to use that specifically. And I only have to bring in the blend shapes for the head. And then I can also test these in KineFX using the character blend shape channels node, which let me add the blend shape channels to the skeleton, which is where all the sort of float sliders for the blend shapes are animated using detail attributes. And then using the character blend shapes node, it's kind of like, you know, the bone deform, but like for the blend shapes where it activates all that stuff and deletes all the unnecessary data for you afterwards. So you can do that, and then later in the chain plug in the bone deform, and that's how you would use this stuff in KineFX. So now let's talk about Apex. When 20.5 came out, I sort of made this little video talking about where Apex is at. I love making these cringy YouTube thumbnails. It's like my new passion. I dove in and talked about all those different auto rig component nodes. Here's some other fun, cringy YouTube thumbnails also that I've been making. So my current thoughts on Apex, you can watch that video for more, but it's still in beta and it's still pretty scary, I think, for most people, most Houdini users to use. But it's much less buggy than before. Like I find it to be pretty reliable now. And it seems really great for Maya riggers and animators. You know, it's been great bringing Jesper over from Maya. He's never used Houdini before, and he's been able to animate this entire film basically using Apex. It's a little bit less intuitive though if you're a Houdini generalist, a standard Houdini user that wants to learn a little bit of rigging. And it could still definitely use a little bit of polish there. But I'm starting to find it very useful for my own projects outside of Turbulence as well. And I definitely wanted to get some features from KineFX that I kind of have to awkwardly bring stuff to KineFX for right now. But the auto rig components are really making things like a lot easier if you want to be able to rig stuff easily. So basically, to set stuff up in Apex, you use a pack folder, you bring in your geo, your skeleton, and your guide skeleton, and just name all this stuff correctly. And after that, everything should pretty much work. So the auto rig component, again, makes it so that anyone can do rigging in Apex. It's like using an auto rig that you might be familiar with if you've used other auto rigs in either Maya, or like there used to be one at the object level in Houdini. Except it's these modular components. So it's much more flexible. And I think the vision behind how these are going to work is really, really smart. So basically I just plug my packed folder into an auto rig component. This is the FK transform one, which just lets me do, basic, FK controls on my skeleton. Then there's the bone deform one. And you can see in here, what this does is in the Apex graph, it's actually like these are all just editing the Apex graph procedurally. So it's adding this bone deform node for me in the Apex graph, and then making it so that my character can deform properly. The FBIK one is really fun and is a kind of a unique one that's given me some kind of cool new stuff that I haven't really been able to do before. So basically, what you need to do is set up the tags on your joints by using this attribute adjust array node. And you can select all the joints you want and add these different string tags that you can use for rigging. And again, I think the whole concept behind this is really, really clever. You press A and just type in whatever you want the tag to be called. So FBIK. And then in here, I plug that in and I get these cool like box FBIK controls that I can move around, and you can have a lot of fun kind of posing characters in a pretty easy way without having to mess with the entire joint chain of the rig and get everything kind of perfect. So it can be nice for blocking stuff out. But what's really cool is you can also select all of the controls, and there's this really awesome thing called the global transform mode, where if you press Control and Shift, you can kind of rotate everything around one of the controls. So it's kind of like creating these on-the-fly FK rigs in a way. And it's a lot of fun to work with. And then on top of that, thanks to some updates that since the release, William Harley's been able to implement for me, you can then also tweak and refine using your regular FK rig on top of all the FBIK stuff. So it's super cool. The global transform mode is awesome. William Harley is doing really awesome updates to all the auto rig component stuff. So if you want to mess with this stuff, I'd say try using the latest build of Houdini, because there's new stuff coming out all the time. But it's just generally fun to play with, and I think the FBIK could be easy for non-animators to use in Houdini potentially. Blend shapes are really easy as well, as long as you set those up. You can get these sort of blend shape controls. The controls themselves could use a little bit of work, I think, these abstract controls where you just have to drag over balls for the time being, but you can, hopefully later on we'll get some fancier sliders and things like that we can play with, and it works for the time being. Then I just do a scene add character, create the selection sets that I want to use, and just save the rig as geo. It's just all a piece of geo, including with the animation and everything. Bring that into my scene, animate it, and get to somewhere where I'm kind of happy with it. And and then I bring it back into KineFX so I can add some jiggle and stuff for the time being, which is something that you can't do in Apex yet. And then after I do that and I have my animated guy outputting from the bone deform, I can then add some vellum, of course, make him nice and jiggly. And I'm doing a tetrahedral sim, and I'm using the distance from geometry from the skeleton to control the stiffness so that it's stiffer around the areas where the bones are. Pretty classic sort of trick that I like to use for character effect stuff and adding jiggles. And then after that, I can just, with a blend shape, literally just blend on and off kind of how much of that I want versus what the bone deform is giving me. So I can make it a little bit more subtle or whatever if I want. And then lastly, it's super fun to add the wrinkle deformer, which is like incredible in the new version of Houdini. It's super, super fast. It's not doing a sim or anything. It's quasi-static. And so I like to just subdivide stuff and kind of brute force it to get these really nice kind of natural wrinkles that you don't really have to do a lot of work for. Then you end up with a, fun little shot of this guy in the end, who looks very silly. So yeah, that's it for the talk. But huge thanks to everybody who's been working on this film and all the amazing help that we've been getting from Side Effects. I think we have like maybe 1 minute left for questions. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was very nice to see the in progress animation, guys. We have 0 minutes for questions. Okay. So if any of you guys have questions for Magnus and Christopher, then please find them afterwards.
Yep, we'll be around. Thank you.
Thank you.